All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's guest conversation with Lauren. Lauren is so wonderful. We had a coffee chat like 3 to 3.5 years ago, like a long time ago when I was first starting like my business journey. And then like, I don't know, I think we just sort of like drifted apart into different like spaces of the online world. But then we reconnected because she was one of the mentors at Imperfect Boss Camp last year. So like 6 or 8 months before camp, I was like, hey, I know you. I was like, how did this happen? Anyway, and so I was part of her sisterhood community for about a year, and such great conversations about things like mental health, parenting, just struggles of the online business owner. And so she has now transitioned her business into soul work and self-love as a soul work and self-love guide. There we go. Say that properly. So, and this is a phrase that she has. I think this is on Instagram. I help women fall in love with their life and their self through powerful soul work, I think. And I just was like, ooh. So I thought just what I know of Lauren and the businesses you've run and like the conversations that you're open to having that so many people like just stay right clear away from. I was like, boundaries. I know who I want to hear chat about this one, because I just think it's such an important topic that not very many people touch on, but yet it is like so foundational to our lives, whether we run our own businesses or whether we have careers or side hustles or we're parenting or like whatever it is that we do. So anyway, for those of you that are on live, please be in the chat, like comment, ask questions, like this is why it's called a guest conversation, because we obviously are going to hear Lauren's story and like her perspective and thoughts and ideas and tips for us. But I also want you guys to be able to ask questions, and we'll do a focused Q&A like at the end. So if you've got a question that's like sort of off topic or like out in the middle of something else, then feel free to just jot it down and we'll touch on it at the end. But if you have a question or clarification, like as we're going, please put those in the chat. And yeah, I'm going to let you take it away now and share your perspective on boundaries and why they're important to you and all that fun stuff. And then I'm just going to hang out in the chat for a little while and then I'll pop back in a bit.
Awesome. Sounds fabulous. So Catherine had shared with me that this is super casual. Catherine knows I love a good soul chat. So I really want to share with you guys part of my own story and journey and the things that I've learned about boundaries. I actually remember the first day I ever heard about boundaries in therapy, which I will share that story with you. So yeah, I love soul chats and conversations, and I don't want this to just feel like me speaking at you. So as I'm sharing my story and journey, if you have like a story or thought that relates or that you feel like sharing, like Catherine said, please drop it in the comments because I'd love to get to know all of you more too. So I was having a conversation with a friend a few months ago, and we were talking about boundaries in her own life. We have weekly calls every Wednesday, and she was like, oh my gosh, like, how do I do this? And I was sharing with her some of my thoughts, and she's like, Lauren, like you just are the boundary queen, or she said something like that. And I was like, you know what? That's quite funny, because there was one point in my life when I couldn't set a boundary with a fly. And I feel like it's because of that, like it led to this really, really toxic low point in my life with a lot of relationships in my life, because I didn't know what boundaries were. I didn't know how to set them. I didn't know how to create that safe space in my life. And it's because of that I now like praise the boundaries. They're so good. The thing about boundaries is I have so many words and things I want to share. So I'm going to try to slow down and make sure I'm staying on topic. But the thing that boundaries give to you is it's massive. They give you so much peace and freedom in your relationships, in your work, in your everyday life. They also give you the space to experience more excitement and joy. Also, they deeply impact your mental health, emotional health, physical health, health all around. They just give you the space to be a sovereign individual human. And I watched your video training on boundaries yesterday, Catherine, and I loved the quote you shared about Brene Brown. It's one of my favorites, which is like, the most compassionate people have, it's not the most boundaries or the strictest boundaries, but something about that. And for me early on, I've been a people pleaser much of my life. And when I first learned about boundaries, I was terrified of them because I was terrified that by setting these boundaries, I would be seen as a mean and bitchy and insert all of the words. Like, I didn't know how to be a kind, loving person and set boundaries. And as I started learning how to set them in my life, it was like this light bulb moment after moment after moment. There wasn't just one where I realized that in setting boundaries, I was able to be so much more kind and loving and compassionate and hold really powerful space for the other people in my life. Catherine, her perspective on boundaries is so powerful. It is. It's so good. And also when it comes to vulnerability, which is one of Brene Brown's topics, like boundaries require vulnerability, and healthy vulnerability requires boundaries. So the first time I ever heard about boundaries, I was sitting in my very first therapy session ever. I was at the lowest point of my life thus far. There was a lot of really dark, toxic. It was a very dark, toxic, negative environment for me and my family at the time. And it had been a culmination of years of experiencing that and trying to be the mediator and trying to be the people pleaser and attempting to be perfect for everyone else. And because of that, I wasn't allowing myself the space to love and care for myself. And it led to this really low moment that is like seared in my memory, where I was like curled up in between the wall and the couch, just crying. And for the next week, I would go to work and I would come home and I was so unable to focus. It was the first time in my life that I was really aware of anxiety, because it was the like heightened anxiety, not just the anxiety that I experience like every week or so now, but it was really heightened anxiety, like on the verge of panic attacks and depression and just the inability to focus on life. And so I knew that I had no choice. I either had to seek help and find someone to help me, like find my life again and find like some semblance of peace and structure again, or I didn't know how I was going to like get out of this. It just felt like everything around me was crumbling. Jay, sounds familiar. Color me even more intrigued. Sounds familiar. Yeah, I feel like so many of us, and I don't know if a lot of you relate to being a people pleaser, whether you do or don't. I think that we all have those really pivotal moments where we're like, where do I go from here? And so for me, the where do I go was therapy, because I didn't have anyone else to turn to in my life that had the wisdom and the support that I needed to help me crawl out of that space at that time. So I went to therapy, and I remember her using all of these words about codependency and boundaries. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what are these words? And I can remember sitting in her office as she was describing boundaries to me and being like, what the fuck are these fences? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, my brain literally could not comprehend how you create this like energetic or emotional fence with other people that keeps them out. Like, it just did not make sense to me. Catherine, major recovering people pleaser over here. And yes to therapy. Yes, therapy has served me so beautifully. Major proponent of it. So she had told me about a book called Boundaries. And I'm blanking on the author's names right now. Dr. Henry, I don't know. But if you search Boundaries on Amazon and find it, yeah, it is Henry Cloud. Cool. So I read that book, and and John Townsend. Yes. Incredible book, incredible entry point into boundaries and learning about what boundaries were. And for me, as I was thinking about what I wanted to share last night, I had this metaphor come to mind. I love me a good metaphor. And I was thinking about the kids' books, The Three Little Pigs, right? And you have the one pig who builds his house out of straw. And that to me is the most perfect visual representation of where I was at that time, like in terms of boundary and knowing where I started and ended and where someone else began, and what was my responsibility and what I had power over and what I didn't have power over in terms of the relationships in my life, right? Like trying to save people and fix people and change people. I was like the pig who lived in a house of straw, and at any given moment, anything was going to topple me over because I didn't have the resources to set boundaries and to have the awareness of what it was like to take powerful care of and responsibility for myself, which is what boundaries teach you. And like taking care of and responsibility for yourself looks like setting boundaries, and setting boundaries is taking powerful care and responsibility for yourself. Crystal, being perfect for everyone else. I can't even, that is so it. Yes. I can remember my first boundaries conversation in therapy. Right? I don't know if it feels the same for you, but it's like soft spot in my heart. Love the three little pigs analogy. Yeah, I haven't ever heard it used in relation to boundaries either, but it's just what came to me last night. So when I was first setting boundaries in my life, it wasn't just about like looking around at my life and proactively setting boundaries, right? Like looking around and going, where am I feeling resentment and what is taking away my energy, and where can I establish better boundaries so that I can show up more authentically and more wholly and more in my power. It was more like my house is about to fall over and I have zero control of my life and I need those fences so that I can rebuild. Like I need those fences in place so that I can start learning who I am. Like it was very, very basic. And so when I think about then versus now when I look at my life and boundaries and my relationship with myself, I am definitely the pig with the house made of brick, right? Like it on the daily, I feel shook a little, like, hello, living the human experience over here. It's a part of life. And yet I bounce back so much more quickly. And I feel ruffled and swayed so much less because I have boundaries that deeply, deeply serve me. And those boundaries deeply, deeply serve everyone else in my life. And I have a few specific stories I'm going to share with you guys because I love a good story. And, you know, all of this talk is wonderful and serves us to a certain point. But I think it's like hearing how it plays out in real life, which is really helpful. Before I go there, a question. Catherine, I didn't ask you this. The majority of you guys in the community here, business owners, not business owners?
I would say in the quarterly, it's about 75% business owners, and then 25% would be stay-at-home moms or career professionals.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because
Cool.
even if people do something else, they also might have a side hustle. So a lot of business owners, but everyone knows like, okay, even if I'm not a business owner, I can take this story and like use it for work. So people are really great about that. Right, Crystal? Anyway, she's one of my professional women rocking it out.
Awesome. Amen. So I have two stories I'm going to share. One of them about like boundaries in personal life with relationships. And then another in terms of business, which really could be applied anywhere and all over the place. But I'm curious to know of you ladies who are tuning in live right now, is there an area of life where you feel really great about boundaries? I'm going to share that in a second. And then is there an area of life, so you can put like one area of life you feel really great about boundaries, two area of life where you're like, yeah, definitely work in progress for boundaries. For me, the area of my life where I feel like really great about boundaries is personal relationships, friendships, family, all those good things, partnership with my husband. And I think one of the reasons why is because when I first was at that point 6 or 7 years ago, where I first started learning about boundaries and needing to set them, it was because of really toxic codependent relationships in my life and me really being unable to see where I ended and where they began. And so that is where my work with boundaries started. And so when it comes to relationships in my life, and it's like, it's the good stuff. Like it is, I love talking about boundaries related to everything. But like we are in relationship with people constantly at all times, whether you are a mother or, you know, a child of you're interacting with your parents or your partners or work or business, like at all times of day, you were in relationship with someone. And even when you're sitting alone at home, you are in relationship with yourself. So boundaries in terms of relationships are the ones I feel really great about. Boundaries in business and career, on the other hand, are a different story. And that's where I have a really fun story I want to share that was so powerful and eye-opening for me recently about boundaries in my business and really regarding money and income. Okay, I want to read your answers first before I share stories. So Tiana, 1, I'm getting a lot better about social/work boundaries. I'm an introvert and usually try to stay busy, but I'm learning to be okay with downtime and finally starting to enjoy it. I just want to say I love that so much, because one of the things I talk and share a lot about in the work I do now is your relationship with yourself, and like what a gift that is to you to like allow yourself that time that as an introvert you so deeply crave and need. 2, so the area where you're wanting to work on is with people. People pleasing is a struggle. Yes, yes, yes. Huge, massive. And you know, I think with boundaries too, the funny thing about boundaries is I had this moment like a month or 2 ago where every Wednesday on my Instagram stories, I share a weekly update. And one of the things I share is what I'm learning. And I was having a week. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I thought I was like some boundaries goddess, like, oh my God, I have it all figured out, like nothing left to learn. And then like life always gets you, you know, it's like, girl, you're still alive. You're still here living, still more to learn. And it was just this like aha moment to me where it's like, whatever the topic is, even when we think we've learned it all, like there's a deeper depth of that learning. And then there's another deeper depth of that learning beneath it. So it's like with boundaries, we can definitely create a life where we feel secure in the boundaries that we've set for ourselves and we feel empowered by them. And yet there's always opportunity and to grow deeper and learn boundaries in bigger and greater ways too. Catherine, great about boundaries. The time and space I give my business in this season, keeping it to a specific dedicated space. That's amazing. Needs improvement, caring for myself. I'm currently allowing too much energy to leave my house, myself, trying to serve. Yeah. Oh, I just like reading that. Like that's caring for yourself. Just acknowledging that is so huge. Susan, 1, family, 2, family, different members. Right. Like just what I was saying. It's like, oh my God, I got this down pat. And then like, you know, person C pops up and you're like, shit, okay. Got to figure out boundaries all over again. J, 1, social/work boundaries. 2, everyone else, the people stuff, right? Crystal, work in progress. I've been trying to live so close to my limits and pleasing everyone else. Human being versus human doing. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And like what a gift it is when we like slow down and can go, oh, whoa, what do I need? What can I do to please me today? And like from that place, you guys, I just have to tell you, like the overflow that then allows you to pour into others without that, like, oh my God, am I pleasing you? Am I pleasing you? But just like knowing that you're serving them is so huge. Cool. Okay. Wait, did I read everyone's? Yes, I think so. Okay. So I want to share 2 specific stories with you guys because I just love a good example. And these are personal stories for me that were both really fucking profound moments just within the last like 3 months. So the first one I'll share is personal, related to the people stuff. And before I share this, I want to say that this is the first time I ever had a really strict boundaries conversation with someone. And I released any and all attachment to the outcome. And I knew the one big lesson for me with boundaries and the way that I identify like where I need boundaries or maybe where I didn't have a boundary in place and I want to set one is resentment. Like let resentment be your spotlight. So like you can look around at your life and go, oh, like where am I feeling resentful? Ding, 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 ding. Need a boundary there. Also, I have a list of questions to help you that I put together, and I'll share it with Catherine. She can share it with you guys later about like identifying and setting boundaries that are really just good journaling questions. So I will be sharing those with you guys later. So anyways, my younger brother is currently living with us for the summer. And a few months ago, we were having a conversation about that. And this conversation was him trying to decide if it was something that he wanted to do or not. So we live in Colorado. He is in North Carolina. And so it was a big move for him. And while he was simultaneously trying to decide if it was something he wanted to do or not, I especially and my husband Josh were deciding, like, what does that look like for us? Like, if we are going to extend this offer for him to come spend the summer with us, what will have us feeling really good about that offer? Because the thing that we do a lot of times as humans is we want to please someone else, right? So we're like, let me give you this big gift and let me offer you to come live with us and stay with us and let me pay your bills, let me do all these things. And yet we do it without protecting our own energy, and then it ends up leading to resentment, and like people can feel that energy. So that gift that you thought was so wonderful and amazing didn't end up serving either of you. So I wanted to be really clear that if we were offering this gift of him coming and living with us for the summer, that it was something where I could truly, truly like gift him with this time and space, and I could feel good about it. So we all sat down for a conversation and I laid everything out. The first question for us was, hey, this is something that you're potentially excited about and could really serve you. What would you want out of your time here if you come and stay with us for the summer? What does that look and feel like for you? How can we support you and your time here? Because I wanted him to feel empowered to set his own boundaries and ask for what he needed from himself and from us. And then I told him, and I was really clear, I said, boundaries are really important to me. And I want you to know that I'm never going to walk away or go into the bedroom and be resentful that you're here. And like, oh, Alex did that. I'm so angry. I'm so pissed. Like, I want you to know, I want to have really clear, open communication because I want you to feel safe in this space and like being here for the summer. So I'm going to be completely honest with you about what it is that I want and need. And I was really clear. So like the first thing was I work from home. I work from home every single day, and my husband Josh goes to work. So the house is normally quiet, and I love to work in silence. Like, I love for it to be really quiet. That's really important to me. The other thing is Josh and I have lived alone with each other for a really long time. So just making sure that like we would love for you to join in and hanging out with our friends and hanging out with us, because my younger brother is one of my best friends and we just adore hanging out with each other. And yet I told him it's really important that you also go out and create your own life here for yourself and spend time doing your own things, so that because Josh and I are going to continue to do our things as well, right? There were several other things, but I was just really, really clear about all of it. And the work that he does, he also works from home, requires him to have the TV on, like watching one of the news channels like all day, every day. And so when I told him like, hey, I do not like the TV on, like that is just a boundary I have to set. If the TV's on playing noise in the background, like I'm going to end up pissed and resentful and like not feeling good. And so he was like, cool, like, can I bring my TV and like put it in the room? And I'm like, yes, like do it. But I was really clear about all these boundaries. And before I laid all the boundaries out, I was clear about why I wanted to be really clear about my boundaries, which was I want you to feel loved and supported. And I want you to know that I'm completely being open and honest with you at all times. And what was funny is we walked away from that conversation and I was like, there is no way he is coming out here to stay with us now. And Josh and I were laughing because I was like, I just laid out so many like rules of like what he can and can't do. There's no way. There is no way. And a few days later, he sat us down and said, I think I want to come stay with you guys for the summer. And it was just, I was telling everyone, like all of my friends about this that week, because I was like, it was the most beautiful example to me of how powerful boundaries are. Like here I was like unapologetic in setting my boundaries. And yet there was still this story of like, oh, there's no way he's going to want to come stay now. Like not with all these rules and boundaries in place. And yet the people in our lives want those things, right? Like for all of you, like parents, like we know, I'm not a parent, but like, you know how much kids want and need boundaries. And like we all, even as adults, we still crave that same structure and safety. And so it just reinforced for me how powerful and important that is. people want those boundaries, so we don't need to be afraid of them. Right. And people want like open and honest communication, right? So that they feel fully seen and known by you. Like, okay, I know where you stand. I can feel good about this. I can feel safe in this space. Yeah, so good. Such a powerful story. Good. I wanted to share it because it was really powerful for me personally, as I keep going deeper into like learning about boundaries and people pleasing, and also like how do I maintain my own needs and desires, so that I can show up fully in those other relationships. And then the other story I wanted to share with you guys is related to business. Also, I missed a few comments. Let me see. Susan, you said resentment is huge and follows you forever if you don't deal with it and nip it in the bud. Right. It just hangs out, right? Like when you have like a plant that just dies and you just leave it there. And it's not cute. Like it's not making the room look any prettier. And you're like, I need to throw that plant out, but like it's still sitting there. Yeah. Resentment is not serving you. Jay, resentment as a sign. For me, that seems like a big tip. And what would be a gift that feel good? Yeah. Yeah. So good. Great story. How's your brother doing? So good. So good. So the most beautiful thing about it is, he's been out here for like a week, I think, or a little over a week. What's the most brilliant thing about it is that like we all went in knowing what was like what felt good to everyone. And we sat down and had a conversation when he first got here. And again, I didn't want him to think, because I think that boundaries, mutual boundaries, like giving and receiving of them is like the healthiest form of relationship with another. And so again, it's like, hey, what's going to have you feeling best about your time here? How do you feel in your space? What do you want and need? Please like communicate with us openly and let us know that, like, just like I'm going to do for you. Right. So I think that it's important, like, and that's also really empowering, especially if you're dipping your toe into setting boundaries with another person, to go, hey, it's not just me. I want to ask you, like, what do you need more of in this relationship? How can I better care for and love you? And this is what I'm going to ask to feel better cared for and loved too. Right. So like asking that of them, I think is just like, especially for people pleasers, is a really beautiful way to go. I'm not just like caring for me and going, it's just about me, but like, it's also about you. I want you to feel served in this relationship. So yeah. Yeah. I hope it will be a fantastic summer. It is so far. Okay, so the second story I wanted to share is related to business and really money for me. So as Catherine shared, I ran an online membership community all of last year in 2018 for female business owners, and it was incredible and it was wonderful and it was amazing. And I had been running a podcast called The Real Female Entrepreneur for the previous 3 years. And at the end of last year, I was really feeling a tug towards doing the work that I'm doing today, which is working one-on-one with people to help them cultivate deeper relationships with themselves, and feel more empowered to care for themselves, and like boundaries is 101 and establishing a clear relationship with yourself. And so I ended up going on a 3-month podcast sabbatical, which became indefinite. And I ended up moving into one-on-one coaching. And there's been, as with business, like several different like experiments of like launching a few programs and then starting to do one-on-one coaching and everything in between. And I had a moment about 2 months ago, or it wasn't a moment, it was like an entire day, where I kept trying to launch these programs that were kind of similar to the online business membership model of the sisterhood, but were different. They were lower priced. It was bringing in a lot of people. And I kept having people reach out and ask about doing work with me one-on-one. And at the time I kept pushing back like, oh, I'm doing this program right now, like not doing one-on-one work. Until I finally was like, wow, okay, I deep down feel a call to do this work in a really intimate, safe space with people one-on-one, and people are reaching out to me to do this one-on-one. I need to figure out what this looks like for me. And so I had just launched a program, and it was like for $70, I think. And I had 2 people join, and I ended up refunding them because I was like, I envisioned this being a group program, not just a space for 2 people. And so I had to have that question of, am I willing to do this 3-week program for $140 to learn and grow, or do I want to refund them and decide what's next? And I ultimately was like, you know what? I finally had this moment where I was sitting outside and I was like, I have set all of these really clear boundaries with most relationships in my life. And I feel so good, right? I am no longer open to relationships where it's me just pouring. Like I need a mutually beneficial relationship where I'm showing up for that person and they're showing up for me, where I am pouring into that relationship and they are pouring into me. I've gotten crystal clear on that with the relationships in my life. And the one place where I had not been clear on that was in receiving financially through my business. For my entire business career up until this point, I had always underpriced the products and the services that I was selling. And by underpriced, I mean I priced lower than what I deeply desired to make from that and what I deeply believed it was valued at. And I did that because I wanted other people, it was the people pleasing. I wanted other people to feel good about paying the price. I wanted other people to actually pay the price. I didn't want to have to sit in what was discomfort initially of claiming this is what I want and need to make. And so as I had one person in particular reaching out and really wanting to start working together one-on-one, like immediately, I was like, okay, I need to figure out what this looks like for me. So I'm going to take time to figure that out for myself. And I took an entire week and I started looking at receiving money from like a business owner perspective, like I look at the relationships in my life, right? If I am pouring into them, even as a coach, like I am showing up and holding massive space for someone, I also need to receive, because if I am underpricing our work together, then it's a disservice to both of us. It's a disservice to me because even if I'm not consciously aware of it, there's that subconscious resentment. And I don't know if any of you business owners like feel like, I'm resonating, but like there is that subconscious or like really quiet resentment that happens when you underprice the work that you are selling. And I knew like the work that I want to do and am doing with women in a one-on-one setting is so powerful and it's so important. And I knew that if I decided to do that and to go into one-on-one coaching, that I was unwilling to not be available to pour in 1,000%, like to show up from that place of overflow. And so I opened up a Google Doc and I was just like writing out like, what are my intentions? What do I need to receive? So before I even was writing down what I wanted the other person to receive, I was asking what I needed to receive from this relationship. And it wasn't just financial. It was, I need the spaciousness of this much time. I need it to last this many weeks. I need our calls to be this long. Here's how I want them to start and end so that I feel like I can like create a really safe, powerful space for these women. And I will leave the call feeling incredible, right? And then came to the financial piece. I was like, what dollar amount would have me feeling so good about this work that I would leave every call and go into every call so ready to give it my all, so ready to hold the most powerful space I was able to hold for these women. And it was a number that was higher than anything I have ever charged before. And yet I knew that there would be zero resentment in that work with a person if I charged that number. And so I did. And there was definitely that little place. And I think that this happens a lot of times when you're first setting boundaries. There was that little piece of like, oh my God, what if she reads this and she's like, how could you charge this? And no, and why did, because I wasn't trying to please the person with that pricing. It was a pricing that I felt good about. And I also believed held space to call the people that I'm working with higher as well. Like it's serving both of us. And she said yes. And it was the most incredible, powerful shift for me, because we spend a lot of time thinking and talking about boundaries in terms of how we spend our time and energy and relationships and other people. And yet money, like receiving and giving money, as a business owner or even in your career, right? And the money that you're receiving if you're working for another company and the time that you're giving, like what does that exchange look like? And that structure in and of itself is a boundary or a lack thereof. And you can create really powerful boundaries that allow you to feel like fully supported and empowered in that relationship and exchange as well. So, yeah. Very validating. Yeah. Yeah. So good. I love that word validation. A powerful perspective. It's been so powerful for me. And I had never heard about boundaries, and I'm sure there's conversations out there about money exchange. And yet it's just like when you're a human being, part of this human experience is money, spending and receiving. And for me, money has been like a really big thing to work through. And so it was really, really powerful for me. So yeah, those were the stories I wanted to share. That was a lot. And I know you said about 30 minutes, Catherine. So I'm gonna rein it in.
That was so fantastic. I was just like I had some moments there. I was like, whoo, I need a journal and a cup of tea and an hour to myself because I need to process some of this. Like, because what we were chatting about right before like the call started and everybody jumped in was just how like the last 3 weeks for me have been such like a rebuilding. Like all of this stuff is coming up in all these different areas of my life, and it's been sort of confusing and like this big like transition. And I know that it's because in multiple areas of my life, I need to step up to the next level. And like, there's something more for me that I have to go after, but like, I have to deal with this stuff and like sort it out and work through. Anyway, so there was a few things where I was like, I'm gonna need some time to process that.
Yeah.
So this is what we're gonna do, you guys. If you have questions that you would like to ask, or like a specific example where you're struggling with something, like let's talk about it. Susan asked, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get to here? Do you want to give us like the summary of your story?
I assume like business, is that what we're talking? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you did talk about like the sisterhood that you ran, and then before that you ran the Real Female Entrepreneur.
Yes. TRFE.
FE. I was like, what's the other one? Female Entrepreneur, that's what it was. Bye, Tiana. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, Tiana. Oh yeah, sorry. Question. Okay, so brief synopsis. My first business that I started was a granola company called Nothing But Nola. It was inspired. I was working a corporate job here in Denver doing HR, was really miserable, was trying to figure out what was next for me, was passionate about food. And at the time, my mom had this massive passion for granola. Like she was making it all the time and experimenting with flavors. It was just fun for her. And so we were on a call one day and she's like, why don't you start a business and sell my granola? So we went into business together. I was always interested in entrepreneurship and business. So yeah, we did that for several years. And towards the end, I ended up taking over everything myself. We were partners initially, and then I was doing it all. And I just realized that I wasn't passionate about granola. I was passionate about business and entrepreneurship, but running and growing from the ground up a business with like such a small profit margin, like with a physical product like granola, like you got to be in it for the long haul. And I just wasn't. So I closed that business. At this point I was like, neck deep in the world of online business and entrepreneurship. And this was back in like 2016. And the conversations about like real talk and like authenticity and like what's really happening were not as prevalent. And I was like, I want to create a space where we can have these conversations.
They were not at all.
Yeah.
That's when I jumped into the online space. I think it was 2015. And I was just like, what is going on? It just didn't seem like super real. It was like everyone living in like these fake worlds. And I was like, I don't understand.
Yeah. You didn't have that movement of like, share what's really happening yet.
Yeah.
And so I launched the podcast, which was initially Grit Grit and Glitter Co., later rebranded to The Real Female Entrepreneur, where I'd sit down and have these incredible conversations with women about their journeys, both business and life. And did that for 3 years. The last year of it, I launched the Sisterhood, which was the online business community, because I wanted to bring the podcast to life in a really cool space like this, like what you guys have. And yeah, then like you heard, ended up not shutting it down. It's just, I shut down the Sisterhood, but the podcast is just still on indefinite hiatus as I launched my personal brand under my name and the coaching business.
Yeah.
Really short. Yeah.
Love it. Such a good journey. But like, that's the thing is like, we have like, it's so important to remember that like none of us got here on a straight line. Like wherever you are right now, it wasn't a straight line. Like the journey is like, oh, here, and this part of this led us to this. And it's like, if we didn't go through those things, like sometimes I look back at some of like the things that I've done or experienced and I'm like, man, I wish I could have done life without that. But I'm like, but do I really? Because that made me who I am today. And it helped me learn those lessons. And that was the trigger for like this thing. And it's like, no, like it wasn't all awesome. However, if I can learn from it and if it can help propel me to the next thing, then it's worth it. So I think that's really good.
You're moving to Denver.
You're
How
moving
cool.
to Denver. So exciting, Susan. Denver, I actually know a few people that are in Denver and it seems like a very great city.
It's a great place to live for sure.
Yeah. So I have a question. I know that a few of the girls had to go, but one of the things that I think is important when you are talking about the personal boundaries, the story with your brother, I thought was brilliant. Just such a great example. And that idea of asking, what would make this a great experience for you? So have you ever implemented boundaries with someone or asked someone that question who, because of their lack of awareness around boundaries, didn't know how to answer it?
Oh, yeah.
And if so, how have you moved forward with that? Because there's multiple, like this is something that Joseph and I are really in the thick of things right now, where it's like we have certain things that we love, and not just boundaries, but also like expectations or the kinds of relationships we'd love to have with people. But if people don't understand their own boundaries or what they would like or want, or maybe they do, but they don't know how to communicate it, how do you still walk that out with people, respecting your own? Because I find that the angst and the like, oh, I just want this to work can sometimes like, hold on. So I'm in the process of like figuring out new ways of like just letting go. But I think it's so important because they're not all on the same journey we are. And so for people, especially watching the replay, who like have experienced that, where it's like, I want to have these and I'm asking people, I'm inviting their input, but they don't know how to give it. How do I still kind of walk that out? So
that's so good. So love this question so much because this has definitely happened to me. So my first like thought that I want to share is that, again, with boundaries, the focus, it's like pulling your energy and focus back to you, right? So again, if someone else doesn't know and can't ask for what they need to be in relationship with you, then it's not, what would it feel like to still stay there and go, okay, like to just hold that space for them, right? Like there's no fixing, there's no, I need you to know. It's just allowing them their own experience. And from that place, if your focus and energy is still on yourself, you still get to set boundaries for you that you need in that relationship. And you're also giving them a massive gift because they may not know, because they may have never been exposed to it. And you're showing them that, right? So they may not know right now, but you can ask for what you need and you can say, hey, here is what I need and would love to ask for, like in this like relationship. And if you think of something that you want to need, like, please feel free to share that with me, But I think, and again, when it comes to relationships, we also get to choose like what relationships we're in and we're not in. So that's a whole nother aspect of it. But if you've decided this is a relationship that I want in my life and want to maintain, then set boundaries for yourself and allow them the space to do the same for themselves when they're ready.
That's so good. That's so good. I love that you were like, we get to choose what relationships we're in and we're not in, but that's another another conversation. We're just gonna leave though, because like that's like a big like deep dive. But it's so true. And I think sometimes when it comes to boundaries, we feel like we can only like the value exchange needs to be equal in the sense of boundaries. So it's like, well, I don't want to communicate what I would like this to look like if you don't know how to communicate what you want it to look like. And sometimes I think that's harder for us, like in the sense of practical, when it comes to practical, like, you know, hey, just so you know, like, I'd rather you text me than call because I just don't answer my phone, you know, like that's to me an easy, like practical boundary to communicate to someone. But for you to say like what kind of relationship you'd like to have with them not knowing, I feel like that's always harder for us. So not feeling like it has to be equal. Like I'll tell you what I would like, and then you tell me what you would like. If they don't know, we still have to be comfortable saying, this is what I would like, and being able to leave it there and create that space. So I just think that's such a good reminder, because it can be so hard.
Yeah. And
to
I
just
think
put it out there because we feel so vulnerable. Because it's like, well, if they're not going to share what they want, then maybe I shouldn't share what I want. But then that resentment ends up building up because of that.
yeah. And that's what I was going to say, like ding, 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 spotlight. That's showing you where that's not another boundary, right? That wanting them to be able to reciprocate boundaries because you want to give boundaries and not wanting to give boundaries if they're not going to reciprocate is you not having a boundary. Right? And that boundary just being like allowing them to have their own experience, because again, this is for you. Like it's not, like it will serve them, but it's for you.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah.
Is anyone who is on live, do any of you guys have a question about boundaries or something that you want to chat more? Ooh, question. Any stories from Jay of setting boundaries with parental figures? Lauren?
Yeah. So here's the other thing. I'm glad you brought this up, Jay, because we've been talking a lot about spoken boundaries. Boundaries can also be unspoken. Like they're for you. And so you don't always, right? Like even the one that you were just saying, Catherine, about like, please call me, don't text me. Let's say that you've set that boundary with someone, maybe even verbally, and they're not respecting it, then you can just ignore the text until they call, right? Or like, or maybe you don't say anything. Maybe you only respond to phone calls. Then people are learning that that's your boundary. But to be completely honest and transparent, a lot of the boundaries with my parents that I have set have been more unspoken because, oh my God, all this is connecting. Going back to the question you just asked, Catherine, a lot of times when people aren't ready to reciprocate what boundaries they also need, they can also be really unwilling to accept your boundaries when you're speaking them. And it can lead to conflict, and it can actually lead to like, it can create more damage for you, right? Emotionally and mentally, than just setting a silent boundary. So for me, that if you feel, I think I don't have any specific stories aside from a lot of times I've had to get really quiet and slow down, which is required to figure out where you want and need boundaries in your life. And in that space, I've been able to ask myself, like, okay, what do I need here in this relationship? How can I ask for that, right? And in asking for that, does that feel like it's serving me? And if the answer is no, then how can I hold that boundary for myself without having the conversation? And also like, this is like where self-awareness is so huge, because also being really aware of like, am I not pursuing like having this conversation about the boundary that I need just because I'm scared and I want to please them and, yada, yada, or am I doing it because I know that the conversation, or I have a feeling that the conversation that we'll sue will be emotionally like damaging to me. But yeah, I would say you set boundaries with parental figures just like you would others, and have a lot of love. And I think that it's really important to express in any situation why it is that you're wanting a boundary. So before you even name the boundary that you're asking for, you can say, I'm feeling, I've been like pouring out so much energy lately, and I need to take better care of myself. I want to take better care of myself. And in taking better care of myself, I have this ask that I want to share with you. Yeah. And so just being like really gentle with like both of you as you're sharing that boundary. But I don't have any specific stories.
I think that is such great advice though. Like, I think the silent boundaries, I love that name. Like, and I think we need to talk about that way more. Like in terms of like a culture, because I think, and even in the quarter, like for me, that was a call out, because I talk a lot about communicating the boundary to other people, but realizing like I need to add in, like, sometimes there's silent boundaries and it's okay for us to just have them and know that this is something, but we don't need to tell other people, and like that's okay. And so I think I need to make sure that that's like a much stronger, shows up stronger in this month, but also just like have a lot of love, communicate the why. I think it's so good. An example of an unspoken boundary with parental or an older person.
Oh, you're asking me for an example. Let me think. For me, like the one that keeps coming up is a lot of like conversations that I'm just not willing to explore in that realm. So one example, like in being a little vague and just like maintaining some semblance of privacy and things whatever I'm sharing and not, is my little brother, like one conversation in particular, he's like, I really would love for you and the parents to have this conversation. I would love for you to talk about this. Like, I really think you all need to work through this and talk about what happened. And so my response is, I've attempted that conversation before in the past. And when I have, it has led to me like feeling like emotionally damaged, right? Like worse than I was before, even though I tried to hold really powerful space for myself and for them. And so for now, for me, that there is a boundary there that I am unwilling to have that conversation because I don't believe that it will serve either of us. And so I'm just not willing to go there. And that
was the same example that I was thinking of. Most of my silent boundaries are actually topics or area of life that I won't talk about with certain people because I know it's just not going to be healthy. And it's like, if I'm trying to build a better relationship with this person or with this friend, then I need to not bring up this. Or I need to not bring up whatever. Like, maybe I need to not bring up my faith with that person, but with this person, we should, never get into politics or whatever. And not because it's not like a topic we shouldn't be talking about, but with that person, it gets unhealthy and debating, and then it's just not serving our relationship. So for me, I found the silent boundaries are usually like an experience or a memory or a topic where it's just like, yeah, you know what? For me to stay healthy and keep a strong perspective and keep building this relationship in a loving way, it means not talking about that, which is so hard when you want to talk through things and work through things and like be able to move past. It's like, no, we just got to leave that. So I think that's so true.
Yeah. And I think this is also where it's really powerful. From my perspective, I have learned that I'm able to talk through and work through things on my own with a therapist, with another trusted person and relationship in my life, to where I do feel a sense of freedom and peace around these topics that are off limits with other people. So
so good.
Yeah.
So good. I love that. Susan said family boundaries, I think, are the hardest. People just don't always respect and take you for granted. So resentment is really easy. We have a family member in AA right now, and he's being really clear about what he needs. So it helps to push you along to be clear yourself, which is so good. That's like amazing. And I'm glad that that gave you some clarity, Jay. It's hard when it comes to family stuff, because who knows like what family member might ever like get a hold of this, or you might know somebody, and it's just like it's hard. You want to talk about these real things, but you don't want to give too practical of examples that like then you're digging into things that are private. So
well, again,
I'm glad that was helpful.
Like that boundary in and of itself of like, oh, like, am I willing to dig into this topic? Is this something I want to share about? Right? Like, does it feel good? Does it not feel good? Does it feel in alignment? Like, that's a boundary. I also wanted to say one thing, Susan. You said people just don't always respect and take you for granted. Like that, I have learned like is them not having a boundary that is serving them either. And so like, how can you just have compassion for realizing that like whatever anger or, feelings are coming up for them, it's just that they don't have a boundary in place that's serving them right now. Yeah. A lot of times. Yeah.
No, it's so true. It's so true. I just think this is such a great like conversation and something that like it needs to get talked about.
Mhm.
Which is why I loved like your sisterhood monthly topics, because it was like having conversations about these things in a real way. Let's talk about therapy. Let's talk about mental health. And I think it's so important, which is why I was like, yes, we're talking about boundaries. I need Lauren. I want to talk about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because like I asked you this like a couple months ago and you were like, what? Me boundaries? And then look at all these new examples you have that are
Right.
like just
Right.
in the last few months. So it's perfect.
Yeah. And I just want to share for you, Jay and Susan, who are still here, and like anyone else who's watched the replay to this point, like I share about this from just this like place of like confidence and peace now. And yet
Mm-hmm.
still when I work through boundaries, and especially in the beginning, there was so much like I was collapsing and there was a lot of tears and there was a lot of discomfort and there was a lot of all of it. Like it was messy
Mm-hmm.
AF. And so I just want to acknowledge that too, because it wasn't just this like really ease filled, like beautiful thing always.
No, no.
Yeah.
I would second that. I
Mhm.
think the times where I've gone through, and I feel like that's kind of what I'm in right now, is one of the aspects of this whole like reshuffling, rebuilding season for me is like really like noticing like energy draws and pulls and having to revalidate, because I've had some great boundaries that have worked really well for a long time. And
Mhm.
I feel like certain things just aren't working again, and I'm out of alignment. Things are feeling off. And so I know that the boundaries aspect is something that is part of all this conversation. It is not a fun thing to like work through. It's not a glamorous topic to talk about or to apply to your life. It is
Yeah.
tough,
Yeah.
tough.
Fully agreed.
So,
Amen.
but so worth it.
Right.
Right? Let's end on the positive note.
Right.
It's tough. It's tough. End recording. No, but it's so worth it.
But it's like you're all human beings, like that's life, like
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
all
That's
aspects of
being on the
life.
planet, being
Right.
alive is tough stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's messy and it's wonderful, like
Yeah.
it's all of it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
I
good.
also don't want to forget. So I have a list of like journal prompt questions.
Oh,
Can I
yes.
send them to you? I'm gonna put them in
Yeah.
a like just like a Google Doc, and then you can share with.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll make sure to add it when the replay goes up for this,
Cool.
because that would be amazing
Yeah.
resource. So
Yeah. Cool.
yeah. Lovely. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming
thank
and creating
you.
this space to have this conversation.
Oh my
It was so, so wonderful. And thank you to everyone that showed up live or is watching the replay. I hope this is really supportive for you guys. So yeah, go follow Lauren. Go say hi, let her know where you came from if you go say
God.
hi. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was so wonderful.